Hello and welcome to Using Azure Functions from Visual Studio and VS Code. In this video, we're going to demonstrate the Azure function from the Azure portal. We've already seen it, so I just want to make sure that you see that it's still there and familiarize yourself again with the resources that have already been created through the portal. Show you how we can create an Azure function from Visual Studio and from Visual Studio Code. By doing this, I want to make sure that you feel comfortable developing directly from the tool that you're already developing with. And you're not going to have to spend all of your day in the portal to work with Azure functions. If you're already familiar with Visual Studio, or you're going to feel right at home working from those environments. Here we are inside the Azure portal, and you can see that we've got the resources that were already created, our function app service plan, as well as the app service itself, and 2 storage accounts. Inside here, we've just seeing one function app, packed serverless, and it has one function inside of it. Now, you'll notice that we have a download app content, and that is a possibility to use, but it's recommended that you do your portal development and your Visual Studio development separately. By that, I mean, if you're going to create from the portal your Azure functions and work with them from the portal, if you're going to do it from Visual Studio, it's better to just do it right from the beginning from Visual Studio. You can download the app content. However, once you do, your Visual Studio content overwrites the functions that you've already got here in the portal. It can just be a little confusing, especially if you're just getting used to it and you're just familiarizing yourself with Azure functions. So I recommend, if you're using Visual Studio, again, just start from Visual Studio, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. And here's our Visual Studio installer, and this is the first thing that you will need to ensure is that you have the Azure workload installed. So select Modify and verify that you've got a checkbox here in Azure Development. And if that box is unchecked, go ahead and install it, download, and get your Azure tools installed. Once installed, you have the option to create a new project of Azure Functions. So let's go ahead and give this useful name. And right from the beginning, we're given the choice of Azure Functions 1 or 2. We can use an HTTP trigger in either one. The storage emulator is not required for HTTP triggers, but for most other triggers, we can go ahead and use storage emulator anyway, and the access rights, anonymous or function. In this case, we'll choose function. And a very similar experience for anybody that's familiar with Visual Studio. We can also add an extra Azure function to our project. This time, give it a blob trigger, or service, or GitHub. And when it's time, we can publish the application. Publishing. This time, we will create a new Azure App Service. Instead of select an existing, we'll create new. It wants to know our Microsoft account. Then the app name, we will stick with functions from Visual Studio. Select subscription, in this case the free trial is what we're using, and the resource group, we can choose an existing or we can select a new. We will use the existing resource group. And the hosting plan, let's use the second storage account that we created. And at this point, I'll stop the video until it's completed the deployment. With just a little bit of time, the application was created and the publish was succeeded. Back over in the portal, we can look at our function apps, and we can see our functions, both created from Visual Studio. We'll switch over now to Visual Studio Code, and one of the first things that you'll notice is that I have an Azure icon on my left sidebar. Well, I get that from using the extensions. And you can search extensions in the marketplace. Just search for Azure and Azure Functions. You can also search by publisher name to get official Microsoft extensions. Azure Account, Azure Functions. All of these are very helpful. And I'll show you what I have with the Azure functions and the Azure tools installed as extensions. The first thing I can do is sign in to Azure. And notice the pop-up down here. It gives a code and a website to sign into. You can also copy that code and open the URL in one click. Now that I've connected to my Azure account, I can look through all of the functions that I've already created. And I can also create a function app. And it's also easy to create a new project. We'll create a new folder, here, VSCode. We can select which language we want for our function project, and we can add it to the workspace. Now that we've created that project, we're able to create a new function. We'll create it in the VSCode. Now, it's very similar. We are given the same types of triggers. Choose an HTTP C# trigger, and we'll just keep the default namespace. With our project created in VSCode, we can right-click the project and deploy it to a function app. Here again, we've got the option to deploy to either of the previously created function apps. We will go ahead and create a new function app, and we can add it to the same resource group. We can select a storage account, create a new storage account, or use an existing one. We'll use an existing. And we see it going through the functions and the builds for publishing to that web app. Our deployment is now complete, and we'll switch back over to that portal to see 3 function apps. One created from the portal, one created from Visual Studio, and one created from VSCode. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to add your code to an Azure function.